about Bryopsis.
So what is Bryopsis, mofo?
Well, it's an algae that's annoying.
Yeah, it's a super annoying algae that's really robust, and it grows on surfaces, and it really digs in, and it can be really, really hard to eradicate. It can grow back from just little bits. If you break it up, it can float around and reset. It can breed in your tank. It can be really tenacious and really hard to remove. If we had a picture of it, we'd show it to you, or maybe somebody's got a picture and we can get it. If you got a picture, well, it won't be on this recording. Never mind.
Hey, when I was on Reef Bum, he said something. I told him about how I use when I come across it, I use a thin diameter tubing and I kind of pull at it and remove it like that. And he was saying something about when you break it, that it could remove spores. And I wasn't confirming or denying that, but I was like, I don't know, it almost sounded like the what's the bubble, the green bubble algae.
Yeah, there was some research done, presented at a MACNA a long time ago, about Bryopsis, and that research, I think I was at the first MACNA I was ever at, done by SeaWorld or something, and the research seemed to show that breaking it would help. It could resettle from little tiny pieces. Not that it would spawn, but that the little breaks could result in more coming back.
Huh.
And that's how you could get more patches of it around. So there seems to be some decent evidence that if you're scrubbing Bryopsis with a toothbrush or picking at it, siphoning at the same time would also be helpful.
Yeah, and in light of that, I think scrubbing it with the toothbrush is probably a bad idea. But the way I do it with a thin tube where you suck it in and then pinch even the tube and it pinches the stuff, that might be a little cleaner because you're kind of siphoning more of it out.
How do you pinch it with the tube?
So I like from BRS, they have that silicone tubing that's real pliable.
Yeah.
So I like to use a thin diameter just so I can control and really. So I'll get it near that patch to where it's sucking into the tube, and then I'll pinch the tube right at the end where you're pinching the algae through it too, and then let it go, and it all siphons down the tube.
Got it. So you're just using a tube that's squeezable as your fingers, and you're plucking the algae basically through the tube while it's siphoning.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can also, so Bryopsis grows on surfaces and it can reach into the surface. So one of the ways I fight it is I will be siphoning all the time, but I'll be cutting with bone shears, and I'll be really scraping the substrate to really chop out the Bryopsis out of the rock that it's on. Just get it out of there. Of course, if it's on a piece of rock that you can remove, you can just remove that piece of rock and you can chip it out or saw it off or pour acid on it or whatever you want to do to get rid of it. But if it's in the tank, bone shears are a good way to kind of scrunch it off. The other way that I found really effective with Bryopsis is to cover it with epoxy and choke it to death.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Just smother it to death. A little patch of Bryopsis now, if I see a little patch, I don't screw around with it at all. I'll take Aquaman and just make a big cover for it, about the size of a 50-cent piece. If the Bryopsis patch is about the size of my thumbnail, I'll just cover it up and leave that for a month or two or forever.
So you said Aquaman?
Aquaman, or any of the two-part epoxies.
Okay.
And you can cover it up, and you can then a month later you can remove that, and the Bryopsis under there should be dead. Seal it up real good so it can't get any resources, and it suffocates in its own death juices. Or just leave that as part of your aquascape from now on and glue stuff over it. At the Steinhardt, we had a patch of epoxy. And here's one of the interesting things about working at a public aquarium. I said, we got to nuke this from space. And I was told, no, let's go through these other methods first. So we would get in with a siphon and scrub it with a brush and try to scrape it off and do all that. And the patch just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I finally got permission to use, when the patch was about, 2 or 3 feet across. It was big. And I got permission to use Z-Spar, which is a 2-part underwater epoxy that's used for boats. It's really good, and it's become the standard for public aquariums. So we mixed up, $400 worth of Z-Spar, and I covered this entire patch with Z-Spar and choked it off and left it there. And within a month, you couldn't even tell that the Z-Spar was there anymore because coralline grew over it. Oh, I also went through, you know what? I just remembered this. So I covered it with Z-Spar, let the Z-Spar start to harden. And then I took a rock, a small rock, and dimpled the Z-Spar so it looked like the rest of the rockscape it was on. So it wasn't just this weird smooth patch.
Yeah, that's smart.
And then within a month, it just was gone and it ended our problem. You know, we had been getting Bryopsis in other parts of the tank, luckily on smaller rocks that we would just remove, but it was all coming from this one patch.
Huh.
We finally covered up, and then no more Bryopsis problems.
Do you not find that herbivores can take care of it?
I find that random herbivores take care of it. If you're lucky to get some herbivore that wants to eat it, which is usually some kind of rabbitfish, you know, the orange spot, the guttatus sometimes gets called out as one that will eat it. But, you know, we had every kind of herbivore you can think of in that tank, and none of them wanted to eat the Bryopsis.
Huh. Visually, how do you differentiate Bryopsis from regular green hair algae?
Bryopsis has got more of a feathered, not a feathered look, but it's got along its stem, it's got kind of more branches would be the right word. I mean, you know, somebody suggested that we show pictures of what we're talking about, but really, if you're tackling a pest, do a search for Bryopsis online and take a look at what it looks like. It's often shorter, although it can grow long. It's usually a darker color, in my opinion, and it's less wispy. It's a thicker kind of, like you can think it's a turf algae at first. And I think that's how it gets by people sometimes.
Yeah.
But it can be vicious. So I say nuke it from space. And I'm telling you, as soon as I started epoxying it or even super gluing it, just covering it up, when I saw it when it was small, you know, like we had the episode, you know, deal with it while it's small.
Yeah.
Bryopsis for sure. Just deal with it while it's small.
Yeah.
So what anything else?
As far as Bryopsis, you know, listening to you, it's funny because listening to you, I know a tank that I have Bryopsis in, and I'm thinking, you know, I've been fighting it for a little while, and it's like, you know, I might have been tackling it in the wrong way. You know, as long as so in a client tank, as long as I can keep everything looking good enough to where a client doesn't go. I don't usually get clients that are like, why is there algae right there? Because I normally keep stuff, you know, pretty well functioning, you know, and they don't really get into that many details. But you know, I might try super gluing over some of these patches because I've been fighting it for a long while. These
you know what I used to do it on smaller displays at public aquarium would be, I would cover it with epoxy, and then I would take a piece of live rock rubble from, you know, I like rubble all the time. I keep it in the sump, or like Julian Sprung sells those stacks, those pieces of flat kind of rock that look kind of realistic. That not like realistic is a weird word. They look more natural, and you can always scuff them up more with bone shears. And then just glue that, and then glue that over the Bryopsis that you've epoxied or super glued. And then it's not a fresh piece of live rock or rubble. It's already got, you know, coralline and all kinds of stuff growing on it. And if you artfully place it over that section, and then boom, all of a sudden, instantly your display is fixed. Or you glue a, you know, coral over that. So it's
I was about to say you could almost use that as a pedestal to try to get another coral going over that, and hopefully just smother and outcompete that.
100%. So, you know, pests are also opportunities. How's that for cheesiness?
For learning. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to have a reef aquarium without going through the whole gamut. You know, the longer you've been doing this, you're going to run through the gamut of everything.
Yeah. And you know, reef tanks aren't set or forget. There's always something to be doing inside the tank, moving stuff around. I'm about to have to, that blue stag in the display upstairs. Since we talked about it, it's about to breach in a whole lot of places.
I'm asking you again for a 10th time. If I can have some frags off of that,
When I pop those off, I'm going to send you a bunch of them. I want to take a video of before and after.
Yeah.
So you kind of get a feel for what that looks like. I love it when the white growing axial tips are just about to hit the surface, and I'll shut off the flow and try to get a good picture of it because I think it's really cool. But yeah, there's always something to do. And, you know, like we were talking with Aptasia, you get the problem while it's small and it's one tiny part of your tank that has a shift in it that you cover with epoxy and put something else on top of it so it doesn't stand out like a sore thumb. But if you wait till it's a big problem, then it's a big problem. Yeah.
That's tricky though, because when you're a young beefer, you know, and you're just like, would have a more experienced beefer come over and say, hey man, you got Bryopsis all over the place there. And you're like, oh, I didn't even know what that was. So, you know, I mean, these are the knowledge that you accrue over time of doing this stuff.
Yeah.
You get to know what all these pests that we're talking about on all these episodes look like. Keep a keen eye on them. And like we said, jump on them when the jumping's good.